morning or good afternoon, dear friends. I am Andrea De Regibus. I am Associate Professor of Orthodontic and Gnatology at the Dental School of the University of Torino, and the topic of my lecture today is about tongue and malocclusion. There is a relation. I hope you can be interested on it. So there is a relation between tongue and malocclusion. So the tongue is really important in the oral structure. You know, the tongue has different form, different dimension. It is a really important structure also because using as a functional appliance, which is energy? From where does the energy arrive? There are many different kinds of functional appliances. You have seen Frenkel, Simoes, Planas. This one is appliance that we use in my university. But if we look in the literature, you can find this interesting book from Graeber, and he said that the functional appliance don't act on the teeth like conventional appliances using mechanical elements such as spring, elastic, etc. They transmit, eliminate, or guide natural forces. So we have to discuss about tongue, about lips, and about perioral muscle. You know that the arch form is due to the force from the tongue and the force from the lips, the orbicularis oris. So if we imagine a tooth like this one, and we imagine the force from the tongue and from the lips, and we imagine that the force are equal, the tooth has a particular position in the arch. But if the force from the tongue is more important than the force from the lips, the tooth will move forward as in this picture. On the other side, if the force from the lips are higher than the force from the tongue, the tooth will be moved in, the tooth will be moved in a lingual direction. So if we imagine a tooth like this one, and we imagine to insert something that changes the form, the dimension of the tooth, and we imagine the force from the tongue and the lip equal, the tooth immediately will be moved forward because we have this kind of diversity on the form of the tooth. So if we look at this image of this patient, and this picture will kindly give to me from Professor Aimeti, that is our periodontist in my university. You can see how this tooth is moved in different position. What Mario made in this mouth? Nothing. Just cleaning and taking away the inflammation, and the position of the elements was changed just because the equilibrium, because between the force of the tongue and the force of the lip were changed. Look at this patient. She is a black, nice girl with, as you see, a very important protrusion of the group from canine to canine. You can see here as all the frontal elements are proclined. And we treat her and something change and something change. And you can see here as in very few months, just 11 months, the form of the arch completely changed. Which kind of appliance we used on this patient? Nothing. We just change the equilibrium between the tongue and the lips. So, tongue, it is a natural conformer. Is one of the engine of the functional appliance. This is the tongue. And I want to remember you that the tongue has 8 different muscles and 2 nerves that controlled the movement. So in this moment, I can ask you, how many tongues have we? And your answer is, I am sure, are you crazy? We have 1 tongue. And I said, are you sure? Are you really sure? Because we have muscle right and left. And in our image, we just imagine that the muscle of the left and the muscle of the right of the tongue of our patient work absolutely in the same way. If you look on YouTube, you can find similar movie. This crazy lady cut the tongue in 2 parts, and you can see how she is able to control the 2 parts of the tongue completely alone. She is able to control the 2 tongue, not 1 tongue. This is really important to remember that we imagine that the tongue is one, but it is a left and a right tongue. And we have to understand that the 2 parts not always work in the same way. So it is necessary to evaluate the symmetry. Look at this patient. Giuseppe is a 90-year-old boy, and you can see how the face is completely asymmetrical. The 2 sides of the face are completely different. What happened? Look at the tongue. The tongue is asymmetrical. You can see here the left part of the tongue is bigger than the right one, and the tongue moves when she completely moves out of the mouth. The tongue moves on the right side. And look what happened in the arch form. The right side is different from the left side. And look here how when he moved the tongue against the palatus, the left side is bigger than the right one. So what happened if the tongue was symmetrical and we try to use that asymmetrically? Look at this patient. Ariana is close to 8 years old, and as you can see, she is quite symmetrical, but she has an important canthus of the occlusal plane. we can see here the right part of the occlusal plane is lower than the left one. We insert the appliance according to my school, and the time passed. The patient used the appliance. She used the appliance. We have a good correction, but what it is really important is that the canthus of the plane completely changed. What happened? How was it possible? It's very simple, because I make a part of this button, the palatal button of my appliance, bigger on the right than on the left. So I take away space for the tongue. So we have to evaluate the function.
Babbo,
Vado,
tetto,
tetto,
dado,
dado,
cocco,
cocco,
The word are not so
lago,
important.
lado,
ciccio,
ciscio,
Sorry, the words are not so important. What is important,
Papa.
you have to look
babbo,
and how
vado,
the tongue
Tetto.
is moving
tetto,
with
dado,
the
dado,
mouth of this
Cocco.
little girl.
cocco,
lago,
lado,
ciccio,
ciscio,
Gigi,
zizi,
Look at the
mamma,
tongue.
mamma,
nonna,
nonna,
fifa,
fifa,
viva,
viva,
sasso,
sasso,
rosa,
rosa,
sciocco,
sciocco,
zia,
zia,
zanzara,
zanzara.
Can you imagine how we can treat this patient without control the tongue? Look at this boy. He has a very difficult and terrible malocclusion. No space for the canine. Any space for the canine on this side. No space for the second premolar lower on the right. But look at the second molar on the left. It was a very, very difficult situation. We extract the third molar and we make a very difficult therapy, fixed therapy, just to correct the position of the second molar. And with a big, big difficult, we were able to save the second molar. At this moment, we treat the patient with extraction just to correct the position of the canine. And we arrived in October 2016, and look at here, no space between the incisors. And the wire was a rectangular stainless steel wire. In December, we have space. In January, the space increased. In February, the space increased more. And we have to stop the therapy. Because what's happened? Happened that this crazy man put this piercing on the tongue. You can see here the piercing. So the function of the tongue completely changed, and from this moment we were not able to control the function of the tongue. We have to evaluate the dimension of the tongue. We have different kind of tongue, different dimension. Look at Stefania. She has a very, very big tongue. And you can see here the position of the incisor, and with a very big tongue like this one, it was impossible to control the position of the incisors. Look at Alice. How we can say that there is a macroglossia, so a big tongue, because the kid is able to touch the point of the nose or the point of the chin like she is. We have to observe the presence of the lingual V. What is the lingual V? Are the tongue tonsil. And we have to observe the position of the hyoid bone. You can see here the very big tongue, and look at Nicoletta. She has a very big a very big tongue and an anterior crossbite. But if you look at the X-ray, at the lateral X-ray, and if we trace a line that connects the mentalis with the third cervical vertebrae, the hyoid bone that you see here has to be down of this line. If the hyoid bone is up of this line, it means that something takes the tongue out of its correct position. And what it can take the tongue out from its correct position are just the tonsils. We have to analyze the possible ankyloglossia. What is the ankyloglossia? It's the fixation of the tip of the tongue to the floor of the mouth, or the alveolar ridge due to the abnormal attack of the lingual frenulum. This limits the movement of the tongue with consequent difficulty of language. It can be complete or incomplete. If we see a patient that had this kind of form of the tongue, we have to think to an ankyloglossia. This is a very important ankyloglossia. We have to cut it. If we don't cut this frenulum, the tongue cannot work on the upper maxilla. The diagnosis of ankyloglossia is made with a proportion of the opening of the mouth with the tongue to the spot, like in this picture, with the maximum opening. The proportion of the two must be major of 50. So it means that if this maximum opening of the mouth is, for example, 40 millimeters, the opening with the tongue to the spot, this one, must be more than 20. If it's less than 20, we have to cut the frenulum. Look at these two kids. They are monozygotic twin. But if we look, they are different. But they are monozygotic. If we look at the tongue, we see that the two tongues are different. And we see here that we have an ankyloglossia. Furthermore, in this one, we have a big adenoid in the nasopharyngeal space with a very small nasopharyngeal space. And what happened? This one is in class 3 and this one is in class 1, but the two are monozygotic twin. It is very interesting cases. So we have at this moment, but in my opinion, it's the last problem, we have to analyze the atypical swallowing. It's a myofunctional problem consisting of an altered tongue position during the act of swallowing, like this one or this one. And look here.
Ingoia la saliva.
You see here how the kid try to close the lip, because without closing the lip, is not able to swallow.
Apri,
If you insert
chiudi,
a
manda giù la saliva.
finger between the arch and the gum, and you have pain during the swallowing, there is an atypical swallowing. Look at this kid. He used pacifier. He was just 6-year-old. Pacifier, atypical swallowing. We take away this pacifier. We teach him exercise. The family, the parents were very strong on him, and he do the exercise in a very nice way. And he correct the malocclusion. And as you see, it is now a non-patient. We continue to control him, and we never insert an appliance in his mouth, because he developed alone in a perfect occlusion without any kind of appliance, just correcting the function. So if we return to this young lady, which kind of exercise we do? A wire, a button. We insert the button on the wire. A sample bottle water. He has to take with the lip the bottle for a quarter. When he is able to take for a quarter, he just inserts more water. And when he is able to take the bottle with half a liter of water. So in conclusion, it is necessary to analyze form, position, and mobility of the tongue. Orthodontics is not just the analysis of the form, but also an analysis of the function. We concurrently treat a patient just analyzing both. And the take-home message, we can use the tongue to obtain great change in the mouth of our patient. And remember, may the tongue be with you. Thank you for your attention.